Welcome back to another Sunday prep day. If you're new here, sorry for the noise. Every Sunday I prep for the week, so that means cutting all my vegetables and making things that take a little bit longer. So today I'm going to make some curry paste and a beef stew, and I'm also going to soak some chickpeas because I need those tomorrow for my curry. And if I want them to have any chance of getting soft within a reasonable time, I need to soak them the night before. So that is that done. And then let's get started on cutting the vegetables, and I'll tell you a bit more about my meal plan. So for the beef stew, I need an onion, so I'm just gonna slice that up. I also need some onion for a few other things, among which the curry paste. So, on the menu for this week, for lunch today, I'm going to have some sandwiches. That's what I usually do on Sunday because I'm diabetic, had to cut carbs. You've heard me say this a million times before. And I found it easiest to just cut them from my lunch, except on the weekends when I have my cheat days and I have some sandwiches. So I have some ham. I'll do some cucumber, just to make it feel a little bit healthy. And yeah, for dinner, I'm gonna have a beef stew. I think I'm gonna have it with some oat rice, because I've been really into oat rice and grains in general lately. So maybe a bit, untraditional, but do whatever you like. Then for Monday, Meatless Monday, for lunch, I'm just gonna have some lower carb crisp breads. I just want an easy meal. Meatless Mondays are always the hardest for me, especially lunches, because coming up with something not meat-based and lowering carbs is difficult. So just for something simple, so the crisp breads are higher in fiber, lower in carbs, and I'll have that with either some cheese or some cheese spread. I have both. So, one more onion, but this one is going to go in the curry paste. So I'll just give that a rough chop, even though it's going to go in the blender, or you can use a food processor. I like giving things a rough chop before putting it in there, just because sometimes things get stuck at the top. It doesn't get pulled in. So by giving everything a rough chop, you minimize that chance. So here I have my blender cup, and this onion is just going to go straight in. Another thing that's going to go straight in is a couple of cloves of garlic. I'm making a nice big batch of curry paste, by the way. I'm not using it all in one meal. I usually just make a big batch, and then it keeps in the fridge for like a week or two. So I'm going to make some next week or the week after. So then I need a little bit more garlic, so I'll just slice that up. I want it a little bit rougher this time, so not dicing it completely or mincing it, just slicing it fine. So we're on Tuesday. So I mentioned on my meal plan that I'm going to have some green beans, but in reality, I have a couple of vegetable options. I have green beans, I have broccoli, I have spinach. So I'm going to have one of those options. So if I decide that I want spinach more that day, I'll have spinach. But I'll just make sure that I have 2 portions of spinach, 2 portions of green beans, and 2 portions of broccoli throughout the week. The exact day doesn't really matter. Speaking of spinach, I'll also use that in the curry for a Monday, and I'll have that with naan. Did I actually mention that? I mentioned the curry paste and stuff. I don't think I've actually said it, but yeah, Monday, Meatless Monday, I'm going to have the curry with the homemade curry paste, and I'll have that with naan, spinach, and I'll add some lentils and chickpeas. So That is some garlic. So yeah, Tuesday I'm gonna have probably green beans, but could be spinach or broccoli, and I'll have that with some pork. Then for dinner I'm gonna do some steak fajitas. So I'm just gonna take some spring onions and I'll just slice them at an angle, mostly for garnish. Just had some leftovers, so I tried to use them up in a bunch of different dishes. So, but yeah, steak fajitas. So I have some steak. I'll have some peppers, some onions, garlic, chilies. That's also a reason why I cut the garlic a little bit rougher, because I don't want it to burn when I do the steak and stuff. So I'll make some space in this container for my spring onions. Since I have it right in front of me, for my curry paste, I have some stems from the cilantro that I saved from previous weeks, so that can go in my curry paste as well. Next up, let's do some cucumber, because I want that for my sandwiches. I sharpened my knives recently. That really makes a difference. We were on Wednesday for lunch. I'm gonna do some sausages with some broccoli, but I can change that. Then for dinner, I'm gonna do a noodle bowl with pork. So the same pork that I'm gonna use for my meal on Wednesday, I'll have more of that, and I'll just cut that into smaller pieces. And stir fry that with peppers, onions, garlic, chilies, carrots. And I'll have that with noodles, and I'll just see what kind of seasoning I'm going to use. By the way, this carrot is also going to go in my beef stew. So I'm just cutting up this whole small-ish carrot. And I'm not going to bother peeling it. It's going to go in a stew when it's sliced in for a stir fry, so it doesn't really need to be peeled. They're washed, so let's get that in a container. Let's see, next up I have a bunch of chilies. I just have a mixture of these, we call them rawit in Dutch, which is the Indonesian name. I think you call them bird's eye chilies. Anyway, I'm just taking the top off, and these are pretty small, so these can just go straight in for my curry. Then I'll do one of these green cayenne. I'll just leave the seeds in, but give it a rough chop, just to make it a little bit easier on the food processor. Chuck that in. Then for things like my fajitas, I'll slice up these 2 cayenne. And then I have a whole bunch of jalapenos. I will take the seeds out of those just because there's a lot more seed in them and it gets annoying with all that pith. So I'll just scoop the seeds right out. And I'll just slice those into ribbons. And this green one, or these 2 greens, I'm going to throw in the blender for the curry paste. And then I have these more orange ones. I'll just slice those up, and I'll use that for the fajitas and all that other stuff. So we were on Thursday for lunch. I'm gonna have sausages with green beans, probably. We'll just see. And for dinner, I'm gonna do a steak pie. So I'm gonna make that beef stew, And whatever I have left over from that, I'll put in some puff pastry, and I'll throw those in my Ninja Foodi. You can throw them in the oven too. Just haven't really used my oven since I got my Ninja Foodies. It's just a lot more convenient. But yeah, that's a good way to use up some leftover pie, and I'll have that with whatever veg I have left over from the spinach, green beans, and broccoli. You're probably tired of hearing me say that by now. Then we were on Friday. For lunch, I'm gonna have salmon, probably with some spinach, but basically any of the leftover veg. And then for dinner, I'm gonna do some fish tacos. I'm gonna cheat a bit. I just bought some fish that's already breaded, and I'll have that with peppers, onions, chilies, garlic, and I'll make like a little sauce with some mayo and some kind of hot sauce. So yeah, these peppers for the fajitas, for the tacos, for the noodles with the pork, and I just have a red and a yellow, just for color's sake. Flavor-wise, it doesn't really matter that much. So let me just quickly finish chopping these. Next up, I have a potato. I'm going to use that in my curry, so I want to cube that up. So I'm going to cut it into thick slices. And I have a nice stable base to work with. Cut them into long sticks and then across for a dice. Then I have a couple of tomatoes. Those are also going to go in my curry. You can use canned tomatoes, but I prefer using fresh whenever I can. I'm just going to quarter them or cut them into eighths, just so they break down a little bit quicker when I cook them. Okay, that's tomatoes done. Next up, I have a whole bunch of green beans. Like I said, 2 meals worth. Generous portions. They're not very high in calories, so I like adding a lot of green. But yeah, I'll just work through this whole batch. Okay, that is green beans done. And then here I have some broccoli. And I need 2 portions, so I'm just going to cut all these florets off. And cut them into bite-sized pieces. Bigger pieces, just cut them in half. And I'll just do that for this whole head. Well, head in half. There we go. And then save the stems for things like stir fries, broccoli, rice, and the like. Then next up, I have some ginger and some fresh turmeric. So I'm just going to peel that. I did put a glove on because turmeric stains really bad and I don't want to have yellow fingers for the rest of the day. So I'll just quickly give these all a peel. And again, I'll just give these a rough chop and throw them in the blender. There we go, we're at 29 minutes, so I'm just going to put the lid on this, get this blended, and while this is getting blitzed into a pulp, I'm going to put away everything I don't need anymore, and I'll also preheat my Ninja Foodi to saute to start the beef stew. So that curry paste is nice and smooth. In a moment, I will transfer that to some glass jars. You want to store it in glass because it will stain plastic. So if you care about your containers, don't store them in plastic, just use glass. In the meantime, my Ninja Foodi has preheated, so I'm going to add some butter. I'll let that melt. And here I have some beef. I'll just cut into some nice big chunks. And now that the butter has melted, I'm going to add my cubed up beef. I'll add some salt and some pepper. And I'll just give that a few minutes. It doesn't need to cook through. I just want to get a little bit of color on there. And while that is sauteing, I'll just transfer my curry paste. And these can just go in the fridge. Like I said, they'll last a week or two. And if anyone's wondering, these are just old peanut butter jars that I recycled. So you don't really need anything special. Well, yeah, the meat has got some color on it now. So I'm going to add half of this onion. So that's about 1 onion's worth. I'll add a few cloves worth of garlic, and then I'll also add some carrot. And I'm just gonna let this soften for a few minutes. And now that the vegetables have softened, I'm gonna add a bit of flour just to thicken things. Just about a tablespoon, a nice heaped tablespoon. And I will give that a minute for the raw flavor to cook out. And here I have 1 beef stock cube. I'll add some bay leaves. These are ground up bay leaves, so I don't have to fish the leaves out later. You can use whole leaves. And then I have some beer. It's probably the only time you'll see me use beer because I don't drink at all. I'm just gonna pour that right in. And this is a bit of a darker beer. And I'm just gonna let this come up to temperature. Okay, everything has come up to temperature. It's simmered for a bit to get rid of most of the alcohol. And now I'm just gonna put my pressure lid on, make sure the valve is closed. I'll change this to pressure cook. For this size of pieces of beef, I'll do 30 minutes. I'm using a pressure cooker, by the way. You could totally do that on the stovetop or even in the oven or whatever after you've browned the meat and softened the vegetables. But I can do it all in one pot like this, and the pressure cooker is a little bit faster. So I'm just gonna let this go, and I'll check back in with you when this is done. That is the beef stew done. That's ready to go for tonight. And like I said, whatever I have left over, I'll just put in some puff pastry and I'll use as the base for a steak pie later in the week. So yeah, that's all the prep work done for this week. I can now have lunch or dinner on the table in minutes. And if you like this kind of content, I do this every single Sunday. And if you'd like to see what I ultimately eat, you can check out my Instagram where I post every single meal, or you can check out the video that I post about once a month on here, where I show you everything I eat in a day for a whole week. And I posted one last week, I think. So if that all sounds good to you, leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, and thanks for watching. Until next time, bye for now.